10 o'clock, welcome in. It is now time for the Garnet Trust Hour here on the game. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you on this Thursday morning. Plenty to react to. Some breaking news coming in this morning that we'll certainly dive into as well. But Wes, I got to ask the question, did you make it to the end of last night's game, or did you change the channel early on that one?
I made it.
You made it?
I made it.
Not a whole lot of redeeming things in those final couple minutes, unfortunately.
Or the
whole game.
Everything except for the first couple of minutes from a South Carolina perspective. But, yeah, are we starting here? That was...
May as well.
That was, I think we got to all remember sometimes things like that are going to happen.
Sure.
And it hasn't happened to South Carolina in a long time this season. And Auburn, for one, all the credit in the world to them, man. Like, they played lights out. They, you look at halftime, they're shooting like 63%, 64% from three.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think they're really a great three-point shooting team coming in necessarily to that extent.
Yeah, they had not gotten over 50% in a game from three all season. 60% last night, 12 of 20, I guess, when the game ended. So that kind of speaks volumes to how good they were.
Yeah, I mean, in South Carolina didn't play great, let's be honest. But a lot of this, man, you're at a building where they just do not lose. And then when they're hitting like they were, contested threes, big men shooting threes that don't normally hit near that many outside shots, and you're not going to win a game when it's like that. And I thought this is a situation for South Carolina where there's a lot of talk going into this game about this being a massive game for South Carolina. I think if South Carolina were to have won the game, then yeah, it would have been one of the biggest wins in a long time, I think. But since they lost, really, it's not a huge deal. What the game that really truly matters, I think, is it is a short turnaround to Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty long trip out to the Plains. It was a Wednesday game instead of a Tuesday game. You're just a little bit off. You've just kind of been humbled a little bit, obviously. And this is a veteran team. I think they will bounce back, but I feel like this game was just a reset. It was a humbling moment, like I said. And Auburn, I mean, there wasn't a team in the country that was going to beat Auburn last night the way they were shooting the basketball.
They haven't lost at home or had any opponent come within 10 points of them at home this season. It's just different environment. Their home and road splits are insane when you look at the statistics. And last night, again, everything that they were doing was hitting. And for South Carolina, kind of similarly to when Carolina played Tennessee a few weeks back. I mean, even basic layups just weren't falling for them. You just have those nights sometimes. And Paris didn't seem too frustrated by it. The players seemed to be, like, hey, these kind of things happen. We play a lot of basketball. You're going to run into nights like that. And I think they'll be in the right mindset coming up on Saturday. But like you said, it's different losing to an Auburn team that, again, is going to be in the NCAA tournament, should make a deep run in it, is in contention with you for the top dog in the SEC as of right now, as opposed to if you lost to Vanderbilt by 40 points the other day, then maybe there's an area of concern, but this doesn't derail anything that this team's done so far and still has all their goals ahead of them.
Yeah, I think Auburn did everything right. They were hitting their shots, they were moving the ball around, they were turning South Carolina over early. That's something we talked about going into the game, is that South Carolina, because of how they slow the pace and because of the way they move the basketball around in their veteran squad, we're talking about, hey, they don't really allow teams to go on these runs. Well, that was not the case. The crowd, after being a little bit quiet early on, South Carolina went out to like a 9-4 lead. Auburn quickly responded. Crowd got into the game. I didn't think South Carolina's passes were necessarily that crisp early on. But I mean, give credit to Auburn too. Like, those guys were defending. I feel like they were making everything difficult on South Carolina. And so you're sitting there, you did miss some open shots, but for the most part, I thought Auburn we're used to seeing South Carolina get a lot of open shots the way they moved the ball around. There just weren't quite as many. And I mean, for Auburn to put a 50 spot in the first half, on South Carolina, a team that just does not give up points like that. And this team, especially on the road against Auburn, a team as good as they are, this team really isn't built necessarily to come back from a deficit like that against an opponent like Auburn. You know,
Right.
we've seen them. We saw Vandy, I guess, was up 5 at the half.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've seen them come back. We've seen them come back against Georgia. They'll fight you to the end. South Carolina will, but it's just not built where you're going to come back from down 22 points
Right.
at Auburn. So
We'll continue this conversation about basketball. Again, Joe Rick coming up at 10:15, former Gamecock basketball player, to kind of give us his thoughts from a player's perspective on how you move on from last night and continue on with the success of the season. But within the past hour and a half, we had some pretty interesting news break that you guys had a little bit earlier on this morning on Gamecock Central, that obviously Justin Stepp leaves at the end of last week to take the wide receivers coaching job out at Illinois, leaving behind the tight end job. And this morning, seems that Sean Elliott is stepping away from his head coaching spot at Georgia State, making his return to South Carolina to be the new tight ends coach.
yeah, and I would say just as importantly, new run game coordinator. And so that's obviously a title. Sometimes those things are thrown in there just as, frankly, just a title. But in this case, you're talking about adding a guy to your staff who has sat in the head coaching seat, who obviously has been an offensive line coach, who has been a running game coordinator before, and I think brings just a ton of knowledge and experience about that part of the game. Guess what? He's had a running quarterback at Georgia State, and you're kind of turning the page here to where you look at your perceived projected starter in Lenora Sellers. He's got run game elements to him. You look at Robbie Ashford, your perceived backup. We've talked about him. He's an athletic guy, has run the football very, very well in his career to this point. And so I think to be able to bring to the staff, especially at the tight ends coach slot on your staff, which generally a lot of times is where you're maybe put a new guy, a young guy, to bring that wealth of knowledge and experience. I think this is a massive hire for South Carolina. We can go to the big picture here in a minute, too, because it's once again an example of a coaching move you would have never seen 5 years ago. We'll get into that in a second, but staying with Sean Elliott, South Carolina, when we sat down with Shane Beamer, Chris and I did, it was 2 weeks ago. It kind of reminded me, so this time last year, and then going through the offseason, there were a handful of things Beamer kind of hammered on that were incredibly important to him going into the season that seemed to be keeping him up at night. One of those at the time, remember how much he talked about, for example, turnovers. We got to limit turnovers. We got to stop turning the football over so much. And they improved in that area this year. I kind of got a feeling, listen to Beamer. He's now had a chance to sort of formulate what his message is going to be going into this season. One of the things he's going to be talking about, in my opinion, all offseason, have to improve the running game. And we've seen them, We've seen them make changes as far as going out completely just revamping that room through the transfer portal. We saw them go out and bring in a veteran running backs coach, Marquell Blackwell. And now you go out and you add run game coordinator Sean Elliott, someone who actually Steve Spurrier, of all people, let come in and completely retool the entire scheme as far as South Carolina's running game when Connor Shaw was here.
Right.
And so I think to add that wealth of experience and knowledge to that spot, timing was important here. It had to just be that Elliott was willing to walk away. But, man, huge hire. And the reactions from former players, fans, everybody has been unbelievably positive.
Yeah, from everything that I heard from his time here in South Carolina previously, a very well-liked coach, very intense coach. And we can get into some of that a little bit later on, but definitely somebody the players are excited to see come back around. Obviously left after 2016 to take that job at Georgia State. And I remember, I think it was after the 2022 season, there was question about his future there. Did come back this past year and got him to another bowl game, made 5 bowls in 7 years there, so did a pretty solid job as Georgia State's head coach. But, as you mentioned, this kind of is a growing trend across the landscape of college football where guys maybe don't want to deal with all the things the head coaches have to deal with and, see these coordinator roles or these position coach roles as a better avenue. And that's the case here with Sean Elliott, who's, again, bringing that wealth of experience and knowledge from not only being a head coach, but also being an offensive line coach, being a tight ends coach from his time at Appalachian State. He's kind of seen and done it all and kind of brings a lot of different perspectives into that coaching room now.
Yeah, he's done everything. He started out himself as a defensive lineman back in the day, so he's seen all sides of this. I thought this was an interesting tweet. Matt Berry from ESPN actually quote tweeted our report and said, spoke with Coach Elliott at the Senior Bowl. He told me NIL challenges and player retention at Georgia State was going to get worse in this new era. Everything is fine, nothing to see here, was Matt's comment. But I think to add context, you have the bigger picture here in that we talked about with Chip Kelly. He leaves a job.
Sure.
And it's like, man, I can go call plays, still be a millionaire, and not have these people trying to fire me. And, Sean Elliott, yeah, there was that one down year in there, but he's been to a bowl game, I think, 4 of 5 years or something like that. He's been to a ton of bowl games there. Really has done quite well as their head coach. So I think he had kind of re-solidified his spot there. But the funny thing is, it's a Camden native.
Yep.
He's a South Carolina fan, literally.
And I had some people on text line. Apparently his family still lives around here, so there's that connection as well.
Yeah, they never really moved. And you would still see Sean Elliott in town. Like he's a Columbia resident,
right?
Basically. So the interesting thing here is that this has been long rumored that he was going to return to this program. It was talked about last offseason. I want to say it maybe even was talked about the season before. Like one of those little things, we hear stuff all the time that obviously half of it or 80% of it never actually comes to fruition. And so his name popped up. Actually, this has been very quiet behind the scenes. His name popped up last night, and it was, hey, Elliott is resigning from Georgia State. And it's like, okay, well, is that in connection to this?
Right.
And obviously it ended up being, but this was something that I think was on his radar if it worked out. Like if the pieces could come together, this is something that was on his radar probably for a couple of years now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, it's hire that makes sense. He's going to bring a lot of veteran experience into that coaching room as well as with tight ends and being the running game coordinator as well. We'll have plenty more on this, more reactions to it, and Chris will join us in the 11 o'clock hour, get his thoughts as well. But we want to jump back in basketball. Joe Rett, former South Carolina basketball player, going to be joining us on the other side to discuss what he saw last night and what he's seen from this team as a whole so far this season. Real quick, want to remind you that, again, coming up tonight at 6 o'clock, Carolina Calls with Coach Paris. We'll get more of his thoughts from last night, as well as looking ahead to LSU and the games they have coming up to close out the regular season. They'll lead you right into coverage of women's basketball as they take on Tennessee, 7 o'clock right here on the game. Pregame coverage starting at 6:30 on our sister station, ESPN 1320 WISW. And then again, as soon as Carolina Calls ends, goes right to tip-off with Brad Muller on the call. Joe Rett coming up next. It's the Garnet Trust Hour here on the game.
All right, guys, give me a second here to tell you about one of our newest sponsors. It's our friends at Classic Roofing with Joe Reeder and Max Sawyer, both longtime residents of the Palmetto State. They've got families who live here, and they want to help you with any and all of your residential or commercial roofing needs here in not only Columbia, South Carolina, but the surrounding areas as well. check out their website, classicroofingsc.com, or give them a call today, 803-590-7870. You can set up a free estimate by going to that website or give them a call. With a wealth of experience spanning more than 20 years, their team of experts is well equipped to handle any and all of your roofing requirements, whether that's a residential project, a commercial undertaking, or really anything in between. They've got you covered. The mission is simple. They want to provide you with top-notch roofing solutions that not only protect your property, but also can enhance its curb appeal. Give them a call today, 803-590-7870, or go to classicroofingsc.com.
Welcome back in. Scar and Shustower here on the game. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you in the Herndon Chevrolet studios. Jumping back in the conversation about basketball. Men's team, obviously, a tough loss on the road last night. 101-61 to Auburn out there in Neville Arena. Welcome in on Love Chevrolet phone lines now. Former Gamecock basketball star Joe Rett. Joe, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. You know, it's been a great season so far. Obviously, last night's loss was really tough. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Coach Paris and the players themselves didn't seem to be too hung up on it. How hard is it to put a deflating loss like last night behind you and move on to the next game?
It'll be very difficult. Losing, going into that game, it's going to be very difficult to go to Auburn, one of the toughest arenas to play in the SEC. But, it was the expectations was there to, just fight, just hang in there. But to lose by 40 is a little devastating. But, we got 6 games remaining in the season. So I really imagine that this team will bounce back because you got some senior backcourt, a backcourt that's full of some good leadership and guys that have been in tough situations. And with Lamont Paris, I have no doubt that this team will definitely bounce back.
Hey, Joe, it's Wes. I appreciate you doing this, man. Great to hear from you. I guess let's kind of go big picture for a minute, just the season so far, because we haven't talked to you about it. What has stood out to you? Just let's kind of try to forget about last night, but just overall, what has stood out to you, man? Just about how this team has come together and how most nights they just share the basketball and are such a team-oriented group.
They just have, again, we talked about earlier, the leadership and the consistency and the unselfishness that this team plays with. This team passes the ball so well. This team it seems like they enjoy each other, playing with each other. You see the joy that they have. Winning always trumps everything, but they play with a lot of spirit, a lot of energy, and they just, play so well together. But last night they ran against a buzzsaw. I don't think too many teams could have went in there and won last night. What they did was took us out our initial offense. They pushed us out a lot last night and made it difficult for us to initiate our offense. So that's where adjustment period come in. I think they'll be back to the grind today, figuring out what they did wrong to be able to get themselves and regroup for the next game on Saturday.
Again, talking to former Gamecock basketball star Joe Rett here. You mentioned that leadership, and this is something that we talk about so much with this team, where Lamont Paris went out this offseason and brought in so many guys from the transfer portal that have just played a lot of college basketball. And outside of Colin Murray-Boyles, who is a true freshman, your starting 5 is pretty experienced across the board. When you think about your own playing career, how big of a difference was your not only confidence, but your style of play and just your maturity from your first year as a freshman to your final year as a senior?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Colin Murray-Boyles. He's doing tremendously well to be a freshman, but like you say, he's playing with a bunch of seniors. My freshman year, I came in with a Terry Dozer, John Hudson, and Grant Price that was in the backcourt with Barry Manning. These guys had experience. In that freshman year of 88, 89, that's the year we went to the NCAA tournament up in Providence to play against the North Carolina State. So when you got a good mixture and a bunch of leaders that teaching you how to be a college professor, how to, prepare for each game, it's huge, and you see that the young fella, Colin Murray-Boyles, is really stepping up, and, it gives you confidence that you can, whenever you mess up, hey, Terry Dozer, what did I do wrong? Hey, John Hudson, hey, Barry Manning, what can I do to overcome my jitters, overcome the turnovers, This team is a really good team I really believe that can make a long run in the NCAA tournament.
Joe, I'm glad you brought up Colin Murray-Boyles. He, I feel like, has raised the potential of this team, like kind of raised the ceiling of what they could be capable of as he has come along this season. But as a former big man yourself, give us some insight on Colin. What stands out to you when you watch him, just about his game and his skill set, and also just his demeanor as a true freshman?
I watched that kid playing at AC Flora a couple years ago and watched his maturity. Honestly, I didn't see this level of where he's playing at right now back in high school. I give him credit for working. I give him credit for just working on his craft. And what you see in him is he has tremendous and great instincts. He seems to always be in the right spot at the right time. He rebounds the ball well. He makes the right pass. And he just does everything that a lot of junior, senior big man can do. And I think we have an up-and-coming star in Colin Murray-Boyles, and hopefully we'll be able to keep him. I'm glad that he's playing well, but, with this transfer portal. Hopefully we can do the right thing and keep this kid.
You mentioned how big of a fan you are of Lamont Paris, and what he's been able to do in just a year and a half's time has been truly incredible. His coaching style is definitely unique in that he's not the guy that's going to scream and yell till he's red in the face. He's not going to break whiteboards on the sidelines or anything like that. He has a very calm approach, and even coming away from last night's game, seemed to be not too distraught about what happened. How does that resonate with players when you have a guy that again is not going to take the scorched earth approach and does kind of approach it as more of a, we like to call it the disappointed father method more than anything else?
Yeah, he's definitely a player's coach. The past regime with Coach Frank Martin, he was a different coach, and he brought the best out of the players that he had, but Lamont has a different style, and he's recruiting the players that he needs to fit his style. So is Lamont is he that demonstrative? No, he's not, but he does get on those players. But the one thing that you see when he do, get on them, he will be positive. He will, when they do something good, you see him the high fives, the handshakes, and he, as he coaches those guys, he brings them up whenever he needs to, and that's what you want. You want that good balance to and the player these days. A lot of guys are sensitive, so you have to kind of be a good balance, and hopefully that encourages those guys throughout the game. You see that. That's why we're winning right now.
Well, Joe, don't you think? I mean, when a coach is just constantly negative, eventually maybe the guys just tune it out. I feel like with Lamont, because he is so even killed. Like if you watch him during a game, he does. I mean, he's got energy. Like he gets after the guys. But
yeah,
I feel like
absolutely.
I feel like it probably sinks in. It probably means a little bit more when he gets animated or gets on a guy because they're like, oh, if Lamont is after me, I better listen.
Absolutely, and he does it it's just a different way. We've seen for over 10 years from another, past coach how he was, but Lamont just a different guy. He's very calm. His demeanor's out there, and then the guys responding. You see these guys that he has there definitely responding to his way of coaching. Before he got last year was tough. We all got to be honest. You always try to see what identity that the program has. We had a good freshman in here, something that we never had before. So it was a lot of adjustments last year. It was a tough year last year, I have to be honest. But this year, you see the identity that he has. He liked big guards. He liked guys to shoot. He let the post play ISO game. And if I was a player, I would love to play for the guy because he lets you play. But the one thing you have to do is play defense. And you want to stay on the court, play defense, and everything else will work out.
Talking to Joe Rett here, former Gamecock great. Joe, what reaction have you heard just here in the Midlands, like here in the community, about this season, about sort of what Lamont Paris is doing? How much better suited do you think South Carolina could be to continue to maybe recruit well in the state? Because, I mean, as we all know, there's always been great talent in this state. It's just a matter of keeping a bunch of those guys home and keeping them in state.
Yeah, the buzz has been tremendous around here. Of course, the women basketball is doing great, but now that the men are doing great, there's so many people coming up to you, man, your Gamecocks are doing well. They don't talk much. Of course, there's nothing to talk about when you losing, but the buzz in the city right now is really good. And like you say, the way college basketball is right now, a lot of guys are going to the transfer portal to get those juniors, to get those seniors, the guys that has the experience. But a lot of young kids like you said, are coming out of South Carolina. We got to get those guys. We got to get in those houses early, the 8th, 9th grade nowadays, just to be one of the first ones to get in those guys' houses and get in those guys' ears so that we want them. So if they continue to do that and he keep recruiting well, and, you got guys on the bench, the guys from around here. Give a shout-out to my boy Kerry Ridge. All these guys around here, his influence has a lot to, he's the mayor of basketball around South Carolina, so he does a tremendous job of doing his part. I don't think he can get in the homes, but he can influence guys by coming back or keeping, because he has so many contacts and so much influence in the state of South Carolina to help keep some of these guys here. So I give a lot of credit to Ray Tanner and Lamont for hiring Kerry Rich last year to help this program and help keep some of these guys home and bring in also some guys. You see Cooper coming back home. That was huge for them to bring that kid back. It's really good for the program. It's really exciting to see the projection and where this program is going right now. Just hopefully we can keep this going.
Absolutely. Well, Joe, once again, thanks so much for taking some of your time this morning. We're excited to see how the rest of the season plays out and see what they can do in the postseason as well.
All right. Thank you guys for having me. Go Gamecocks.
Absolutely. Again, Joe read a Gamecock great in his own right. I give him some thoughts on what he's seen from the team so far this season. Baseball gets started tomorrow. Quick reminder, the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway starts tomorrow. Think about it kind of similarly to Low Release, a special teams touchdown contest we did back in the fall. It opens up tomorrow on 1075thegame.com. Go and register, and when the Gamecocks do hit a Grand Slam this season, you could be a big winner. Again, 1075thegame.com. Be on the lookout for that tomorrow. The Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Jump back in the Sean Elliott conversation as the Garnet Just Hour rolls on here on The Game.
All right, guys. Guess what? Football is over, but we still got Major League Baseball coming up. We got March Madness coming up. Why not give our friends at Integrated Media a call and let's upgrade that TV? Let's upgrade the man cave. Let's get everybody ready for some sports watching parties. Call them today right here in the Columbia area, 803-948-8327. Honestly, yeah, they can upgrade your TV, but it's so much more. Smart home, if you want to kind of take that next step there, if you want to go full home theater system, maybe turn an extra bedroom into a home theater. Again, TV installations, security and cameras, and then really anything audio and video in your home. For me, it was upgrading my internet. We obviously had that one cord coming in, but the Wi-Fi wasn't reaching. I didn't have Ethernet in my office. They took care of both those things and did it in really like an hour. So give them a call today, 803-948-8327, our friends at Integrated Media.
Welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell along with you on your Thursday morning. Thank you once again to Joe Rhett, Gamecock basketball legend, for joining us for a few minutes there talking about what he's seen from this year's team. Reminder, you can always listen to us here on The Game, of course, on the radio, 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach, 100.5 The Game in Florence, 107.5 The Game here in Columbia. Also on The Game TV, sponsored by Shepherd's Glass. Go to youtube.com, search The Game TV. Give us a subscribe. We also hit the bell icon to stay notified anytime we're live or doing uploads. And you can also download the 107.5 The Game app. Take us wherever you go, around the state, around the country, around the world. You can always have The Game with you. I want to jump back into this conversation about Sean Elliott, which, again, news about 2 hours old from when you guys broke it on Gamecock Central. But kind of looking at this tight end room, and we'll talk about the running game situation as well in a second. But when you look at this tight end room, this is something we talked about the other day. Yes, you're losing Trey Knox as he's going on to play football at the next level. We have Josh Simon. We talk about all the hype around Brady Hunt now that he's actually finally a South Carolina Gamecock, though there were some questions about that for a while there. But you also, have Michael Smith coming in. You have guys like Connor Cox, Reed McKeska that haven't been able to show their full potential quite yet. You have a pretty loaded tight end room, and again, a veteran head coach coming in to take that role as the coordinator of that position, the coach of that position for this upcoming season.
Yeah, and I think these hires lately, they're not all along the same lines, but there are some commonalities here. And when we talked to Beamer, we asked him, did you seek out to just add so much experience with these hires? And he sort of said it it is a little bit of a coincidence that it's just played out like that. However, there were obviously certain things he was looking for in these coaching hires, and it so happened to work out that there was some availability among coaches that really have a ton of experience. And, I'll go back to what he said about Dow Loggins and when he was talking about both the Coley hire and the Blackwell hire. And it was along the lines of, if I'm an OC, that can be a lonely chair. And you need to have, yes, at the end of the day, the one guy to call plays, and everybody at a certain point, everybody else has to just be quiet, right? It's your decision at the end of the day. However, in kind of those moments where you're in a game and you're having to make live adjustments, having someone who around you who has kind of been in those moments and can be another set of eyeballs and can say, hey, coach, I think they've shaded this guy here. Maybe they've tweaked this defensively to what they're doing to us. We need to do this in response. And you kind of got the impression, Beamer wasn't going to throw his guys under the bus, but you kind of got the impression by him bringing that up that he wanted there to be a little bit more of that. And so you have that with Coley, who has called plays.
Right.
You had that with Blackwell, who is a former quarterback himself, which I think is tremendous in terms of knowledge of how everything fits together. But now you have a guy, if you're Beamer, you have a guy in Sean Elliott who has sat in your chair as head coach before, but also has been running game coordinator under Steve Spurrier. And so I think just being in a situation, something that any of us watching a game would maybe never even notice, like, hey, they're shading this guy a hair that way, or hey, coach, they're jumping this against us. I think having another just set of eyeballs and that knowledge in the kind of the huddle, so to speak, on the sideline goes a long way. I mean, Elliott can coach tight ends. He'll do great coaching those guys up.
Right.
To me, this hire is actually about much more than that for South Carolina.
What does the dynamic look like between him and Marquell Blackwell, being that Blackwell's the running backs coach, but he is the running game coordinator?
Yeah, I look at it more like, so Blackwell is more about development of the running backs and truly teaching the running backs in both in drill situations and on the field and in your room every single day watching film, like, hey, this is how we want to do this. This is the technique for pass protection. These are my teaching points for ball security. The literal recruiting, relationship building, and development of your running backs is on your running backs coach. Running game coordinator, you're more talking about schematics. And there is going to be, I would imagine, some carryover there and some sort of situations where Elliott and Blackwell are going to make sure that they're on the same page of, hey, here's the coaching point for this run. Or, hey, running back is a natural position where natural ability is a huge part of it, but there are certain cues on certain schemes where Sean Elliott may say, hey, Coach Blackwell, let's make sure that their landmark or their eyes are here on this particular run in this particular situation. So, yeah, there's carryover. I think not that Elliott is your play caller, but he is going to have, I would imagine, generally with that title, there's quite a bit of influence on what you're doing schematically within the running game. And, Steve Spurrier would go as far as, from what I've heard, at times being like, hey, Coach Elliott, give me an inside run here. And it might be a simple inside zone. That's our base. Okay. But Spurrier would literally lean on him like, hey, if it's a pass, I'm calling exactly what it is. If it's a run, Coach Elliott, this is what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. But what do you think works against what they're doing?
Right.
And so from what I'd always heard, Spurrier really empowered Elliott quite a bit within what he was leaning on him for. Right. So we'll see. And you know what? Real quick talk. I think this says a lot about Shane Beamer to be willing to go out and hire a guy who there's still people who say, hey, they should have made Elliott the head coach after he was the interim instead of Will Muschamp.
Right.
And to hire a guy who is a big personality, who has been the interim head coach at South Carolina, who has a lot of following here in Columbia, and just to be like, I want to make this program better. I'm not really worried about kind of sometimes I feel like coaches are unwilling to hire a bigger name to their staff because of how it might look for them.
Yeah, there's a gatekeeping element to it. And again, we have somebody like Sean Elliott that had a decently long tenure at South Carolina before, and as you mentioned, was even talked about as maybe being the guy to have taken over full time after Spurrier left. And I could see apprehension, but again, I mean, Shane Beamer seems to have a good person, a good relationship with everybody, that he works with. I don't feel like that's something that would be a deterrent to him. And again, when you look at the experience that he already has on the coaching staff, having the opportunity to bring in somebody that again is already familiar with the area for recruiting ties and all that kind of stuff, where you don't have to get him up to speed and all that kind of stuff. I think it's one of those things that you couldn't pass up if the opportunity was presented to you.
Oh, no brainer hire, right? And I think, and the reason I bring that up, I always thought Will Muschamp was very hesitant to hire a big name OC.
Yeah,
it was like, hey, we're gonna win with defense, and the offense is gonna be called based on complementing my defense and funneling everything back to the defense. And so they never really went out and said, look, I'm going to go hire a big name as far as offense coordinator. I always kind of wondered why that was. But I think overall, man, this is one of those things. You had an opportunity to go get Sean Elliott. Again, timing, much like what we talked about with Coley.
Right.
The timing had to work. But in this case, it did. And a lot of people, I mean, I've got friends texting me, hey, man, I know he lives here, but why would you leave Georgia State? There is a bigger picture element here of NIL, transfer portal. You're at a place where other teams are just going to raid your roster every year if you're Georgia State. So it does kind of make sense in this new college football age.
Absolutely. We'll touch on that a little bit, just kind of this landscape of college football and how it's changing and how this kind of thing might become prevalent as the years go by as well. That's coming up. It's the Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you on your Thursday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you. A couple more minutes wrapping up this hour, and then Chris Clark will jump in with us for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Again, reminder, baseball starting tomorrow. The Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway also starts tomorrow. That's coming up.
Can you say that 3 times fast?
Don't tempt me with that. I'll have the worst tongue twister you've ever seen. It'll go live tomorrow on the 107.5 The Game website. Just head on over there and register for your chance to win. And similarly to the Lori Lisa Special Teams Touchdown Contest, $25 goes in the pot for every single game. When the Gamecocks eventually do hit a Grand Slam, you could have the opportunity to win that money again, all starting tomorrow with Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Continuing on with the Sean Elliott conversation, we can't encapsulate all this in about 5 minutes, but there's this changing shift in the landscape of college football. We mentioned it with Jeff Hafley going to take the Packers defensive coordinator job, Chip Kelly going from being a head coach at UCLA and now being the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Now you loop in Sean Elliott with going and becoming South Carolina's tight end coach, leaving his post as the head coach at Georgia State. By the way, they are already starting spring practice. They're on day 3. Their spring game is coming up in about 3 weeks, and now they're suddenly looking for a head coach. Like, this is just the new reality of college football that we're living in. But you mentioned that quote from Sean Elliott, at the Senior Bowl a week or so ago, where, they're one of the schools in the midst of a big city like Atlanta, where you already have a school like Georgia Tech. And, oh, by the way, the University of Georgia is in your state as well, where from an NIL standpoint, you don't have any chance of competing in a place like that.
Yeah, and I mean, who do you go hire on February 15th?
I don't know. Let me look at their coaching staff. See who might be able to slide in.
That's got to be the direction you go, I would think, man. But that's wild. And so, you know what? I think worth mentioning, they've lost a lot of good coaches over the years too. Like, they've had assistants that have left over the years from Georgia State. Some guys with ties to South Carolina, or former players even at South Carolina. So, I think, man, with this move, it just illustrates, again, kind of the big picture pressures that are on head coaches. And if you're at a place that isn't one of the haves, where you do have some money rolling through, then it is tough to stay afloat. And once again, kind of presents this idea. It's just another example of the fact that you're almost playing, even though these are all college football teams and schools, you're playing two different leagues, basically. And so, I'll be curious to see what Georgia State does. You got to think they'll go in-house, but I didn't realize that at first, that they had already started spring practice. Yep. And that just goes to show you as well how, I don't want to say how ready to leave, but Elliott, obviously, this is something that he really, truly wanted to do, right? I guess.
So their defensive coordinator is Chad Staggs, who was at Coastal for several years. He was very good there.
He G8 at South Carolina.
And he was also an interim coach at Coastal as well. So if I was betting right now, I'd say you maybe slide him into the coach role and maybe try and figure it out from there. But, yeah, definitely a weird situation where you're already in the midst of preparing for next season with spring practice, and now suddenly you have we usually don't have much coaching movement happen in the month of February, but I guess at this point anything's really possible, right?
We for how things are structured right now, this is the new normal, I think. And I mean, the Chip Kelly stuff happened? That was last week, right?
Yeah,
was that Friday?
I
think that was Friday.
Yeah, I think it was. Kind of got lost in the shuffle of the weekend, but yeah.
So we, at this point in college football life, we do have February coaching moves, which is just weird. And I think this is another situation, though, where it just made, big picture-wise, if you haven't recalibrated your brain, you're like, that makes no sense.
Right.
Then you kind of dive into it, and you're like, this makes complete sense. Like, his family, like, he's a Columbia resident.
Somebody mentioned, I think his son goes to AC Flora, so everybody's still here.
Yeah, it makes quite a bit of sense, and again, a great hire for South Carolina. We're going to add Chris Clark to the mix here in a moment and get his take as well.
By the way, Chad Staggs, also an assistant at Lexington High School before he came to South Carolina.
Yeah, he's an up-and-comer. He probably, I mean, I don't want to speculate. I have no idea of the inner workings, but he's got a shot at that.
Yeah, for sure. And that would make sense, guy that's been around the game of college football for quite a while. And when you're kind of scrambling and in a pinch to figure out who can be your head coach for, I don't know what the hiring process would look like this late in the going. That's the interesting thing now when you are trying to make a head coaching move, similarly to Boston College with Jeff Hafley going to the NFL. Like, a lot of the good viable options aren't really on the table because most of that hiring does get done in December and January. So now you're scrambling like, okay, who can we hire? Usually it's got to be a coordinator from somewhere that, maybe you wouldn't have otherwise hired, but you're just trying to fill a role where maybe it's a situation where you just give it to a guy like Staggs for a year, see what happens. And then if you need to reassess the situation at the end of the year, you do. But definitely a tough spot for Georgia State to be put in now.
Tyler, you're from Georgia. Are you interested?
I'm actually an alumni of Georgia State, believe it or not. I got my associate's degree there, but hey, if they call, we can have a conversation. I guess
pays pretty well.
So I hear. Also, getting fired pays pretty well too. So if I can go in there and be successful enough to get fired in a couple years, I think I'll make a pretty nice bag.
Not a bad idea. We got Takeover next?
That's right. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Can you talk about this? Also dive back into basketball as well here on your Thursday on the Game.